The moment the texting stops, a subtle but powerful shift occurs. It's a silence that speaks volumes, not because of what is said, but because of what is suddenly absent. To understand this, we need to look at the established pattern. When you are consistently texting a woman, especially in the early stages of attraction, you are actively building a routine. You become a predictable part of her daily landscape. The good morning message, the check-in during her lunch break, the good night text. This consistency creates a comfort zone, but it also establishes a specific dynamic. You are the initiator, the pursuer. She occupies the receptive role. While this might feel like you are driving the interaction forward, it inadvertently places the power of response and thus the control over the interaction's pace and intensity firmly in her hands. She grows accustomed to your presence in her digital world, a presence she has learned to expect without necessarily having to earn or actively maintain. When you suddenly cease communication, disrupt this entire ecosystem. The predictable rhythm is broken. It's akin to a soundtrack she didn't even realize was playing suddenly cutting out, leaving an unnerving quiet. This void is psychologically jarring. Human brains are wired to notice change and patterns breaking far more acutely than they notice consistency. Your absence, therefore, becomes a louder signal than your presence ever was. Initially, this might manifest as simple confusion. That's odd, she might think. I haven't heard from him today. This is the first critical seed of curiosity. If you were always the one to reach out, she now faces a conscious choice: to remain passive and let the silence continue, or to become active and break it herself. For the first time, the ball is in her court in a way that requires a deliberate action, not just a reaction. This confusion quickly evolves into a series of questions that force her to actively think about you, often for the first time in a while. The narrative in her mind shifts from "what will he say next" to "why has he stopped?" This internal interrogation is where the real magic happens. She might wonder if she did something wrong, if you've lost interest, or most intriguingly, if your attention has been captured by someone else. This last question taps into a fundamental aspect of attraction: perceived value. When someone appears to withdraw their attention, it can trigger a subconscious reassessment of your worth. If you are no longer readily available, your attention is no longer a given commodity. It becomes something that can be lost. This can create a phenomenon often called reverse psychology, or simply eliciting what you might not easily have: the stopping of texts. Therefore, is not about playing games from a place of insecurity. It is a strategic pause that serves two essential purposes. First, it forces her to invest mental energy in you. She is now thinking about you, wondering about your motives, and questioning the previous dynamic. This mental investment is a form of currency in the economy of attraction. Second, and perhaps more importantly for you, it creates the necessary space for you to break your own pattern of chasing. It halts the one-sided effort and allows you to regain perspective, to see if she will make the effort to cross the digital divide you've just created. In this silence, you both are tested. She is tested on her genuine level of interest, and you are tested on your ability to value your own time and energy enough to not give it away indiscriminately. This single act of stopping can transform the entire foundation of the interaction from a pursuit into a potential partnership. Or it can reveal the painful but liberating truth that her interest was never there to begin with. The decision to stop texting a woman you're interested in is often misinterpreted as a tactic, a manipulative ploy designed to trick her into missing you. While that can be a byproduct, this view fundamentally misses the deeper, more crucial purpose. At its core, the act of stopping is an act of reclamation. It is the moment you consciously decide to take back the power, attention, an emotional investment you have been giving away without receiving a commensurate return. It is the ultimate expression of self-respect in a dynamic that has become unbalanced. To understand why this is necessary, we must examine the unhealthy pattern that develops when you are the perpetual initiator. In any healthy interaction, especially in the early stages of romantic interest, there should be a mutual dance of advance and retreat, a balanced exchange of energy. When you find yourself consistently carrying the entire conversation, being the only one to ask questions, to propose ideas, to bridge the silences. You inadvertently create a parent-child dynamic. You become the supplier, and she becomes the passive consumer of your attention. This is profoundly unattractive because it signals that you value her attention more than you value your own. You are essentially communicating, through your actions, that your time and emotional energy are low-value commodities, freely available regardless of whether they are desired or reciprocated. This is the foundation of neediness, and it is one of the most potent attraction killers. Continuing to text in this scenario is not persistence. It is self-sabotage. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. You pour more and more of yourself into it, but the level never rises. You are operating on the hope that your continued effort will eventually be rewarded, that your dedication will prove your worth. But attraction doesn't work that way. You cannot negotiate desire. You cannot convince someone to feel a spark through the sheer volume of your messages. In fact, each unreciprocated text sent into the void diminishes your perceived value, little by little, moving you further from the goal of being seen as a confident, high-value man and closer to being categorized as an annoyance or, at best, a harmless source of validation. The act of stopping, therefore, is not about giving up. It is a strategic and conscious choice to break a cycle that is harming your own well-being and chances of success. It is the equivalent of finally noticing that the bucket has a hole and deciding to stop pouring until it is repaired. This decision forces a recalibration of the entire dynamic. By withdrawing your constant attention, you accomplish several critical things simultaneously. First, you create space for her to participate. You allow the silence to exist, which gives her the opportunity, if she is genuinely interested, to fill it. If she never has to reach out, you will never know if she wants to. Second, you shock the system out of its complacency. The sudden absence of your predictable attention disrupts her perception of you as always available, forcing a reevaluation. Most importantly, this step is for you. It is a declaration that your time, energy, and affection are valuable and must be earned, not given away freely. It is the moment you shift your focus from seeking external validation to reinforcing your own self-worth. This internal shift is palpable. When you stop chasing, you naturally begin to invest in yourself, your hobbies, your career, your friendships. This self-focus is the true engine of attraction. Confidence is not built from receiving attention. It is built from achieving goals and respecting oneself. By stepping back, you are not just playing a waiting game. You are actively building a life that is full and compelling with or without her. This makes you inherently more attractive. Ultimately, stopping the texts is the first and most powerful step in transforming the dynamic from one of pursuit and supplication to one of mutual interest and respect. Or it provides the clarity needed to walk away without regret, freeing you to find someone who is eager to meet you halfway. The impact of your silence is not a one-size-fits-all phenomenon. It is entirely filtered through the woman's individual personality, her experiences with attention, and her pre-existing level of interest in you. Understanding this distinction is crucial to accurately interpreting her reaction, or lack thereof. Fundamentally, women can be categorized into two broad archetypes based on their relationship with validation, and your withdrawal of attention will affect each differently. The first archetype is the woman who has become accustomed to, and often thrives on, male attention. For her, validation is a familiar currency, a constant background hum in her life. She may be attractive, charismatic, or simply surrounded by a social circle that includes many admirers. In this context, your consistent texts, while likely appreciated, are often viewed as part of this baseline level of attention. She may enjoy the chase and the reassurance that comes from having options, even if she isn't deeply invested in any particular one. When you stop texting this woman, the effect is psychological jolt. It's as if a member of the audience has stood up and walked out of a play she is starring in. This breaks the script. The initial confusion, why has he stopped, quickly morphs into a more pressing curiosity. Her ego, accustomed to a certain level of engagement, is piqued. This is where the principle of scarcity comes into play. When something that was readily available becomes scarce, its perceived value often increases. Your attention, once a given, must now be questioned. This can trigger a competitive instinct or a genuine reassessment of your worth. She may begin to wonder if you've lost interest or found someone else. And this uncertainty can, paradoxically, reignite her attraction. For her, your silence forces a question she rarely has to ask. What did I lose? This can prompt her to re-engage, not necessarily out of deep affection. The greatest obstacle to walking away is often not the woman herself, but the elaborate fantasy we construct around her. This is a deeply human and common pitfall, particularly when feelings are strong and reciprocity is weak. In the absence of a fulfilling reality, the mind seeks to create one. You are not just becoming attached to the actual, imperfect person you are texting. You are becoming addicted to an idealized version of her and the potential future you imagine together. This fantasy is a dangerous trap because it creates an emotional debt that reality can never repay, locking you into a cycle of hope and disappointment that makes disengaging feel like a profound loss. This fantasy-building process is subtle and incremental. It begins with small daydreams, imagining a perfect first date, a witty conversation, or a shared laugh. But as the real-world interaction becomes more sparse and unsatisfying, the fantasy grows more elaborate and detailed to compensate. You might find yourself mentally crafting entire life scenarios, meeting her friends, going on vacation together, even picturing a future family. The real limited woman is gradually replaced by a custom-built phantom who is perfectly compatible, endlessly affirming, and exists solely in the safe, controlled theater of your mind. This phantom requires no effort, presents no challenges, and always reciprocates your interest. The danger is that you begin to invest real emotional energy into this imaginary relationship. Every text you send is no longer just a message to a disinterested party. It feels like I communicate to your soulmate. Her sporadic, lukewarm replies are then overanalyzed and inflated to fit the narrative of the fantasy, misinterpreted as shyness or playing hard to get rather than the signs of low interest they truly are. This attachment to potential is what makes stepping back so difficult. Logically, you may know she isn't putting in the effort, but emotionally, you are fighting to protect the beautiful story you've written. Letting go feels like admitting defeat, not just in a dating scenario, but in a dream you've nurtured. This is why you might find yourself making excuses for her behavior, clinging to the one positive interaction you had weeks ago while ignoring the 20 that have been non-committal since. You are essentially trying to force the real, complex, and possibly disinterested woman to conform to the one-dimensional, perfect character you've created in your head. This creates a toxic cycle where the disappointment of reality drives you deeper into the fantasy, which in turn makes the reality even more disappointing. Breaking free from this trap requires a conscious and often uncomfortable grounding in reality. It demands that you shift your focus from what could be to what is. This is an act of rigorous honesty with oneself. You must actively interrogate your own narrative. Instead of asking, could she be the one? You must ask the more immediate and evidence-based questions. Is she making time for me? Does she initiate conversation? Does she seem genuinely excited to hear from me? Is the effort balanced? Write down the answers if you have to. Look at the concrete data of your interactions, not the hopeful story you've superimposed upon them. This process is not about cynicism. It is about clarity. It is about differentiating the woman from the myth, the energy you were pouring into the fantasy, the daydreaming, the overanalysis, the constant checking of your phone must be forcibly redirected. This is where the practical work of reclaiming your power begins. That mental and emotional energy is your most valuable resource. Instead of wasting it on a phantom, reinvest it in your tangible life. Pour it into your work, your fitness, your hobbies, and your existing friendships. By doing so, you accomplish two things. First, you starve the fantasy of the energy it needs to survive, allowing it to fade. Second, you build a real, fulfilling life that becomes inherently more attractive to potential partners, including perhaps but now from a place of genuine strength, not needy hope. Ultimately, escaping the fantasy trap is the essential internal work that makes the external action of stopping the texts not an act of desperation, but a confident choice based on self-respect, the principles of value. Attention and mutual effort are not confined to the early, uncertain stages of dating. They form the very bedrock of sustaining a healthy, long-term relationship. The dynamic that begins with texting, the push and pull, the investment of energy, the risk of taking someone for granted, evolves but never becomes irrelevant. Many relationships falter, not because of a catastrophic event, but from the slow, silent erosion of effort that occurs when one or both partners begin to believe the other's presence is a permanent guarantee, no longer requiring active maintenance. The spark doesn't just vanish on its own. It is extinguished by complacency. The initial thrill of a new relationship is powered by novelty and pursuit. Both partners are on their best behavior, putting energy into impressing each other and creating shared experiences. However, as comfort sets in, it's easy to confuse familiarity with security. The pursuit ends. The man who once planned creative dates may settle into a routine of Netflix on the couch. The woman who once engaged in deep, flirtatious conversations may begin to direct her emotional energy elsewhere. The consistent texting that once felt exciting becomes perfunctory or stops altogether, replaced by logistical messages about groceries and bills. This shift is often subtle, but its impact is profound. When you stop actively dating your partner, when you cease to be a source of novelty, excitement, and focused attention, you risk becoming a fixture, a comfortable piece of furniture in the landscape of their life. The relationship transitions from a dynamic partnership to a static arrangement, vulnerable to stagnation and resentment. This is where the concept of the long game becomes critical. Maintaining a relationship is a conscious, continuous choice, not a passive state of being. It requires the same strategic understanding of value that applies at the beginning. Just as you should not give away your attention indiscriminately while dating, you should not allow it to become an expected, low-value commodity within a relationship. Your time, affection, and energy must remain appreciated. And the key to this is maintaining a degree of personal identity and independence. A partner who has their own passions, friendships, and purpose remains inherently attractive and interesting. They are not a satellite orbiting their partner, but a whole planet in their own right, choosing to share a gravitational pull. This self-sufficiency prevents neediness and ensures that the attention you do give is perceived as a gift, it's not an obligation. The practical application of this is a commitment to perpetual courtship. This does not mean grand gestures every day, but rather a consistent, low-level investment in the connection. It is the decision to put away your phone during a meal and have a real conversation. It is planning a surprise date night, not because it's an anniversary, but simply to break the routine. It is sending a text during the day that has nothing to do with logistics, but instead shares a memory or expresses appreciation. It is the daily choice to see your partner not as someone you already possess, but as someone you are still trying to win. This mindset fosters mutual appreciation and prevents the taking for granted that kills desire. Ultimately, the long game is about understanding that attraction is not a static prize won at the beginning of a relationship, but a flame that requires constant fueling. The man who stops texting in the early stages to reclaim his power must evolve into the man who, within a committed relationship, continues to value his own identity and intentionally invests in the partnership. By doing so, he ensures that the dynamic remains one of mutual desire and respect, where both partners continue to choose each other actively every day, long after the initial chase has ended. The goal is to build a relationship where the silence between texts is comfortable, not concerning, because the foundation of value and effort is so strong that it needs no constant reassurance.